And now, please welcome Metlakatla Indian Community Councilman David Boxley for our opening prayer.
Good morning. Before I begin, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for being asked to do this and how honored I feel to bless this event in the language of my people, some Aliyah. We samoga katsam lachaga, lusanatus kam go gwa. So I'd gaudi a lugi get wat get will zara de hois kam nach yubagwa. Di wilayan haboltum nalip intludixum huam. De matlak oorlis gaat nies, lacht gala aks, lik sta, gan, met zigale, het trani in da wil wanam. Tlagau die trani hach kam go na li waim, tlawal huwalam dagwa, het gat ledem. Gwenu yu dag wan met hem kam god, gat trani gal zip zap, hachskit, gu gat goedix dagwa. Dim wil lip mamskit, en a lip wil not ilt alt. Algers ga halal segwa. Daab amap algers dip dem wil qalzacht. Laat gekoidex het orchem go asuk or. Het zoal alge dip die wilai godem la wild. Wilaim al apqalksa achkem. Hoiga de la wild te gigette. I will dip needed noom asagyan. We samorget heel de gonam suelairem. At a needy la wildem at swords, at a horn. Simqan at a skiet, out at a sits all, dip neer in suelairem at a tlanach nonach, good in sta amaniedzem as sagyan. Zu aske dip neest, da al skudem quilnik nietskem, dip dim nie matlak old ak amaran sagyan, dip dim will nie heedig a wekiem, at a gaslimk dien, wat get a likski gedem gal zips up, gu am da will a lord. Adam gwyniets en dag am llawalik am godem, at a llawal gestauntem, da ama get wild get. Gwenu yu midam am god, gat chani haka thelset, dat chani gal zip zap. Dip nede int ama dat do go as suki get. Gwenu yu midam am god, gat lus barait gat nis noom in sip sip get a god. dip neder han gårdet en lipzapt. Zit was zoek een, dem wilt galkse nie sepensk. Jagai lebast, dem jagai wil kosk, dimt lip geten na god. Gwenu je met hem kom god, gat gaat nie in samom a lugi get. Sagait mamskum, en a stok a gwet, in tkitis toest. Heelde hem, dip neder al aboed. Als ge gan goms dim deelt gem, jagai dip dim wak am gosk. Nan ze dip sigat ledder na god, so they get him, ni walde will the law leg get. Dimt gineetska mianam dak dimt nieska will alom, tchal den a huam. Tchal as naslak adaut, score dak tchal as na al hawaki di get it. Oirsum President Biden, Secretary Herald, trani get it in luhakatel sit the marks come wab, wilt warm, wilt gwildem gaun, trani go dak God gestip niet, wil net is dal, gigeen wachlu, dem sagait hakatelsum. Dipt hem amet dat door, gaat niet go nach nuiem as again. Dipt hem sarait go na gat ledem, dem wil de achtem dem gatwenskum, an lipgal zipt zabem. Some orget nach noch, kam god nach dat gaat niet wil likski get. Great Chief of the Sky, this is an amazing thing. Indigenous people from so many great nations of this beautiful land have gathered here together. You know that we have our own precious names for every mountain, lake, river, island, tree, flower, and for everywhere we exist. After all we have suffered, we are still here, and we are strong. I ask that you bless all of the delegates who have come here to represent their people. This is heavy work, but a good weight to carry on our shoulders. Challenging times are coming again in the new year, and even though we don't know what will happen, we know we will get through it like our ancestors did, because we are them now. Great Chief, you have taught us many lessons. Just as we've learned from the birds and the salmon, our teachers are cedars and spiders, porcupines and beavers, and the ancient guardian spirits who are watching over us even now. While they may be invisible, we need only look around to each other this morning and see that we have brothers and sisters of many nations who are doing good things, showing us that we are already blessed and surrounded by heroes. I ask that you bless all who work for their communities. They are building good things for the next generation. I ask that you bless those among us who are hurt and so are cruel to their own people. May they find a new way to see with eyes of love instead of eyes of fear, to find wisdom and free their hearts. I ask that you bless all who are allies of Indigenous people, and together, alongside those who are also oppressed and made poor, we are many. We should not search for vengeance, but rather find forgiveness. Let us strengthen each other's hearts as our ancestors did. Let heaven look upon our deeds and see that we are good caretakers, worthy of our names and titles, worthy of the memory of those who have gone on before us, and worthy of those who have yet to be born. We thank President Biden, Secretary Herald, and all of the White House staff for inviting us and preparing everything here. Bless them and their families. I pray that we will work together and peacefully consider everything we hear this day, and that we gather our strength so we can give all to our communities. Bless us and all of our nations. Nithwan. Amen. Thank you.
And now, please welcome Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Good morning, everyone. Gwatsi halpa tuhuname itzatuitza shuimi hanu. Greetings, tribal leaders, elders, community members, friends, and colleagues, and happy White House Tribal Nations Summit. Thank you so much to the Color Guard for presenting our colors. I also want to acknowledge all of the veterans who are here today, and thank you for your service to our country. Thank you to the War Paint drummers out of North Carolina for the songs and for guiding us through this day. And thank you for that opening prayer, David. I'm so honored to have each of you with us for today's event. Early on in my tenure as secretary, when this building was unfamiliar and the road ahead packed full, I knew one thing for sure, that while my role as secretary was new, my intentions for Indian country were not. I knew that it was my job, our job, to achieve enduring progress for our people with the time we were given. January marks the 50th anniversary of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, a seminal law that gave tribes the right to administer and oversee implementation of their own federal programs. 50 years of asserting that tribes have the right to make decisions about the well-being of our own people. It gave us the power to chart much of our own course and to decide how our people could best thrive after generations of relocation, termination, boarding schools, underfunding, and neglect. That act was written into our country's law books only after the federal government was swayed to action by game changers whose indisputable and unflinching activism spoke clear and loud and unified. We are still here. Well, my friends, a half century later, we are still here. Charting our own course, and together with the Biden-Harris administration, we have made extraordinary accomplishments for Indian country, progress that would make our trailblazing ancestors proud. Transitions are disruptive regardless of how we might feel about one leader or another. That's true on tribal councils, and it's true in Washington. We don't know what the future may hold, but what I want to focus on today is the enduring progress we have made. Progress that, no matter what, cannot be taken away as long as we continue to press our voice and our action forward. We're going to talk a lot today about the damage caused by federal Indian boarding school policies, and in spite of the trauma this brings up for so many of us in this room, I wouldn't have it any other way. I launched the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative in my first few months in office. I didn't know then where it would lead us, but I knew that its purpose was long overdue. Over the past 3 years, this initiative has shed light on this horrific era of our nation's history, but it also led to our two-part investigative report, which found that the federal government took deliberate and strategic actions through boarding school policies to isolate children from their families and steal from them the languages, cultures, and traditions that are foundational to Native people. It created the Road to Healing, a 12-community journey for Assistant Secretary Brian Newland, for our dedicated colleagues, and for me. Our visits to Indigenous communities gave survivors and descendants opportunities to share their boarding school experiences and the aftermath those schools left behind. It also led to the creation of our Oral History Project. So many of you spoke bravely and forthright during the Road to Healing about the horrors you endured or the trauma that was passed down over generations. Those stories must continue to be told. That's why, with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities and Mellon Foundation, we engaged the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition to help create an oral collection of first-person narratives from boarding school survivors. Today, I am so proud to announce new agreements between the Department, the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and the U.S. Library of Congress that will preserve these survivor stories and experiences and share them through far-reaching resources, such as online and both traveling and long-term exhibitions. That is enduring progress. And because of this work, and because of us, President Biden formally apologized for this brutality. He stood on tribal land and listened to our songs and honored us with his words. As we heal from our past, we have worked to change the way the federal government engages with Indian tribes. That includes enhanced involvement in land management decisions. Over the past 4 years, our administration has made co-stewardship of our lands and waters a top priority. While the concept is not new, the Biden-Harris administration is the first to make it a strategic priority for the health of our ecosystems and the durability of tribal sovereignty. Today, our department is publishing our third Tribal Co-Stewardship Annual Report, which outlines the details of 69 new agreements from this year alone. You'll hear me talk more about this in our afternoon panel, but here's the number I want to underscore. Between the Interior, Agriculture, and Commerce departments, our administration has entered into 400 co-stewardship agreements with tribes that span across our entire country. Since time immemorial, ancestral homelands have been central to the social, cultural, spiritual, mental, and physical well-being of Indigenous people. Through this unprecedented number of co-stewardship agreements, the Biden-Harris administration demonstrates our commitment to acknowledge and empower tribes as partners in the management of our nation's lands and waters. These agreements have become foundational to our work. Add to that the tribally led conservation efforts that we followed through on and that President Biden supported, like Avikwame and Bajnawavjo Ita Kukveni, ancestral footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monuments. And that is enduring progress. We have also made quick work of delivering historic funding from President Biden's Investing in America agenda to projects that support tribes and their access to critical resources. One area that I am deeply proud of is our effort to fulfill settlements of Indian water rights claims, long-promised water resources to tribes that depend on them for resilience and long-term planning. For those of you who have engaged in these settlement negotiations, you know they are long overdue. But even after the arduous process of negotiation, many tribes have waited several more years to find financial resolution. Thanks to President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law, our department was tasked with implementing an historic $2.5 billion through the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund. This work has never been more important, and today I am excited to announce a nearly $65 million investment that will help fund 9 different settlements. This marks our final Indian water rights settlement allocation, meaning our team has exhausted every last dollar provided to us from the law. That is enduring progress. Our expansive investments in Indian country to the tune of $45 billion will undeniably build a better future that our kids and grandkids will inherit. But to build a better future for Indigenous peoples, we can't only rely on the federal government doing its job. We need to expand access to capital for tribes to invest in their people and on their terms. We have talked in previous summits about access to capital. With tools like the Buy Indian Act, our department has had an outsized impact on improving the funding that tribes and Native business leaders receive. This past year alone, Interior awarded over $1.4 billion in contracts to Indian-owned and controlled businesses, up from just $317 million in fiscal year 2019. Now it's time to raise the bar even higher. In partnership with Native Americans in philanthropy and our colleagues at the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, Agriculture, and the Small Business Administration, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, today we applaud the launch of a Tribal Community Vision Partnership. Over the next 7 years, the Vision Partnership will raise and deploy $1.2 billion in impact for tribal communities, a historic effort that will support priorities like community development, new clean energy opportunities, and support for Native small businesses. Now more than ever, these types of partnerships and allyship will be needed. By working together with partners in the philanthropic and private sector, I know we can support the advancements that have been made over the last 4 years to support tribes' self-determination and their right to govern and grow on their own terms. And of course, that's enduring progress. If you take nothing else from my remarks today, let me say again, the Biden-Harris administration has ushered in a level of enduring progress that no one can take away. No one. This is my last year to address this audience as Secretary of the Interior, and I want you to know that I leave here inspired. I leave empowered by all that we have accomplished together. When I was a young kid moving from city to city and coast to coast with my family for my dad's military career, our people were demanding something simple: a seat at the table, a voice in the decisions that affected us on self-determination. And because our people spoke up, stayed engaged, and remained unwilling to accept the status quo, we are here and finishing up a monumental administration where Indian tribes had a true seat at the table. Everything that we accomplished was real and tangible. A transition was inevitable, and even though some of the future seems uncertain at this point, one thing is certain: we're not going anywhere. But it's on each of us to stay here, to stay engaged, to refuse to let anyone threaten the enduring progress we have worked so hard to accomplish. Like our ancestors who made previously unimaginable feats possible, we must never back down. So to my friends and family from far and wide here today and online, thank you for joining in what has been a most incredible journey of my life. Indian country is better because of each of you. Thank you all so much, Dawa. Thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be in this room alongside you, and I look forward to spending more time with you during the rest of the summit. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
getting there.
Please welcome to the stage our panel on investing in Indian country.
Ani Boujou, everyone, good morning. My name is Liz Carr. I am the Tribal Advisor to the Director at the Office of Management and Budget. And with me today here, I have Chairwoman Stephanie Bryan from the Porch Creek Band of Creek, I'm so sorry about that, Porch Band of Creek Indians, Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis from the Gila River Indian Community, Deputy Secretary Andrea Palm from the Department of Health and Human Services, Deputy Secretary David Turk from the Department of Energy, and Mr. John Podesta, the Senior Advisor to the President at the White House. And today we are going to be talking about the importance of investing in Indian country. In my role as the advisor to the director at OMB, I really have a unique perspective and a complete vantage point of all of the investments that have made it out into Indian country during this administration. Each year during the Biden administration, we've called for historic investments in tribal communities and really helped to lay the foundation for shared growth and prosperity for decades to come. In addition to investing in tribal communities, just last year we signed the executive order on reforming federal funding and support for tribal nations to better embrace our trust responsibilities and promote the next era of tribal self-determination, where we've taken steps to design and administer federal funding and support programs for tribal nations in a manner that better recognizes and supports tribal sovereignty and self-determination, because we know that tribes know best how to serve your own communities. So today our esteemed panel will discuss how those transformational changes are going and the investments from historic legislation that this administration was able to get across the finish line, including the American Rescue Plan, where tribes, Native communities, and Alaska Native corporations received more than $32 billion, the largest ever single federal investment in tribal communities, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, where the Biden and Harris administration is providing over $13 billion specifically for tribal infrastructure, including $3.5 billion dedicated to water and sanitation projects for Native communities. And lastly, through the Inflation Reduction Act, where we're making over $4 billion in strategic investments directly to tribes, Native communities, and Alaska Native corporations to harness the power of renewable energy, modernize energy resources, and strengthen climate resilience. And so today, my first question is for Governor Lewis. Governor Lewis, could you please describe some of the most impactful Gila River projects that were funded by the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act?
Thank you, and Skuksiala. Good morning to all my fellow tribal leaders here. It's great to see everyone. The community has really seen this as a historic time, this historic investment with both the ARPA, BIL, and the IRA funds. Now, for the community, I think we've had a tremendous partnership with these departments, with Interior, with the Bureau of Reclamation within the Interior, with the Department of Ag, and also with the Department of Transportation. Now, for transportation issues, the I-10 in Arizona runs 22 miles through the Gila River Indian community. And this was a portion, and a critical portion that needed to be expanded, not just for economic, but because of what was called a fatal funnel. It went from 6 lanes and 4 lanes to 2 lanes on both sides coming through the community. And so we had a number of accidents that are occurring. And working in partnership with the Department of Transportation, we were able to get the capstone funding to complete this $1 billion project. It was the first time that the Gila River Indian community and a tribe were able to get one of these huge transportation grants. And that shows just how important it is for tribal input for these critical grants that before just states were able to secure. Now along the Colorado River, the community and the 30 tribes in the basin are key players in this, what would be called the worst, the most acute drought in over 1,000 years. And the community has worked in partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation for not just for water related issues, but for long-standing, for the future water infrastructure projects. The community was able to contribute 15% of the total water conservation to protect the water supplies along the Colorado River in Lake Mead. And we did that all the while with the federal government respecting our water settlement, respecting the trust and treaty responsibilities of these 30 tribes in the upper and lower basin as well. I mean, there's still much to do, but we are laying the groundwork, and I think this is so important. With all these projects that Indian country has been able to tap into, to unlock after decades of Indian country being shut out. I think we're looking at best practices that we can use, not just now, but for the future as well, to continue this incredible amount of investment in Indian country that I think we all know as tribal leaders, we all know that needs to continue. You know, we've worked even with the Army Corps of Engineers as well on a very innovative, I know exactly, on a very innovative project of solar panels over canals. Working with the first Native American Assistant Secretary on the civilian side from the Taos Pueblo, Michael Connors, as well. So there are some great, I think, changes that have occurred during this administration that we need to continue to build on as tribal leaders, as tribal nations grow, as we build upon. I can't say it any other way. We build upon these wins. Because we know that there is so much more that needs to be done in areas of investment, of access to clean water, of roads as well. And we need to look at just exactly how we were able to unlock these investments, both within the BIL and the IRA, so that we can continue to really provide a groundwork for future investment.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Deputy Secretary Palm, and as a former IHS senior advisor, I was extremely excited to see the bill get across the finish line to deal with some of the longstanding water and sanitation issues. And so, Deputy Secretary Palm, could you please share from your perspective some of the most enduring, transformative projects that tribes and Native communities have been able to access that HHS has supported from the ARP, the bill, and the IRA?
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. So lovely to see you all again this year. I will have to agree with Liz. While HHS didn't get the vast billions in the infrastructure law that some of my sister agencies did, my very favorite provision in all of it was the $3.5 billion that the Indian Health Service got for water, sanitation, wastewater disposal. My first official visit as a federal official during the Obama administration was in tribal country was in the Great Plains area, and the sort of transformative experience that was for me when I visited homes and tribes and communities that were struggling with clean water, with appropriate sanitation, and with the really fundamental things that we all as humans and communities and members of families need to be healthy and well. It sort of came full circle when we had an opportunity to enact this provision with the president's leadership and really start driving some fixes in this space that are just, again, so critical for the health and welfare of our kids and our families. And so we have, through this provision, allocated just over $2 billion of the $3.5 billion in wastewater and sanitation dollars to 637 projects across Indian country that will impact 95,000 tribal homes and communities, which is just a start, I know, but a really critical start in bringing to bear the assets and the leverage that we have to help the health and welfare of tribal communities. I think a really concrete example, the Omaha tribe in Nebraska struggling with their wastewater treatment facility built in 1979. My friends at the EPA told us it no longer was able to process safe drinking water for that community. So our $5 million investment is going to help construct a new wastewater treatment facility to bring that community safe drinking water, those families, those kids. Really important investment that will endure and will last and provide for that community in a way that they've struggled with again since it was built. And so I think we feel really good about the infrastructure investments, right? Those are things that will endure, that will last over time. In the ARP, we distributed about $7.5 billion, everything from immediate COVID response dollars, vaccines and arms, testing, the kind of work that we did in partnership with tribes to protect tribal members in the immediate crisis of COVID, to public health workforce infrastructure investments so that tribes are better prepared for future public health emergencies, to investments in child care. We invested about $1.5 million with a tribe that was able to bring 138 kids off their wait list and into childcare that previously had been unable to be served. We invested in things like data systems. We invested in things like elder care for tribal members, in language preservation, other types of programs with our ARP dollars, again, that were about building capacity, building infrastructure, building things that in partnership with you all, you told us you needed and were important to the health and well-being of your communities over time and through generations. So we feel really good about the investments we were able to make, Liz, and looking forward to getting the rest of that $3.5 billion in sanitation money out the door and into your communities.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary. As we all know, tribes are often at the brunt of the climate crisis, and the Inflation Reduction Act is one of the most aggressive action on climate and clean energy in American history. This question is for Senior Advisor Podesta. Could you please comment on some of the key successes you've seen from the IRA in tribal communities and how you see it continuing to benefit Indian country moving forward?
Thanks, Liz. And let me start where you started, which is the effects of climate change in Indian country and on tribal communities. I think it is clear that tribal communities are bearing the brunt of, and a disproportionate brunt of, the effects of climate change that we're feeling right now, from the historic drought in the Southwest to fires across California, the Northwest, and really all across the country, flooding across the country. The heat waves that are being experienced, those disproportionately affect Native communities, cultural and subsistence resources, and tribal lands. Earlier this morning, I had the pleasure of meeting with some friends from the Yakima Nation. Dave and I have been working extremely hard over the last couple of years at the President's direction, to help restore healthy and abundant runs of salmon in the Columbia River. We're working with the 4 1855 treaty tribes. There's a separate agreement with the upper river tribes out there. But all of that work is made more urgent, and it's also made more difficult because of the effects of climate change. So we're very aware of that, and I think that's why the President put so much effort and emphasis in trying to pass what is truly the world's largest investment in clean energy, and to attack the climate change in the history of the world, not just in the history of the country. And the IRA is designed, I think, to attack every sector that's emitting, and tribal resources are going to tribal projects across that full suite of effects. There's $720 million that's directly dedicated to programs for tribes in the Inflation Reduction Act, but their tribes are also eligible for competitive grants, and already more than $2 billion of awards have been made to tribes, again, across every one of the programs that's in the Inflation Reduction Act. I do want to give a shout out to Secretary Holland, who I think she didn't need to really pressure her cabinet colleagues, but believe me, she did, to say, don't just think about those monies that are dedicated specifically to tribes. Every program deserves a thoughtful response from your department at the most senior level, and every cabinet secretary, not just the ones represented here, has really stood up and empowered offices at the secretarial level to make sure we're delivering across that. DOI, for example, has awarded $120 million to build resilience in funding upgrades for infrastructure and water supplies to go along with the money that Andrea's working on. NOAA's climate resilience regional challenges have funded more than a dozen projects across the country. There'll be an announcement today of 4 more drought resilience awards to tribes using indigenous knowledge to help deal with the effects of drought. The chairman talked about the really innovative, he didn't brag enough about the project that we saw. I'm sorry, the governor. The governor didn't brag enough about the project to put solar panels over canals on his reservation. That was the first of a kind in the country, and one that I think is going to be replicated in the Western Hemisphere. Great. I told you, you didn't brag enough. You bragged more last year, Governor. But it was really an amazing project. The Bureau of Reclamation has put out $320 million dedicated to tribes to deal with the Columbia River drought. And again, these programs are innovative. The Forest Service is trying to use indigenous knowledge to better manage and preserve our forest resources and to make investments in climate-smart agriculture and forestry. One of the things, Dave might talk about this, we've got a dedicated pot of money in the loan program office at the Department of Energy. And the first major loan was just let for a $73 million solar and storage project on the Viejas Reservation in Alpine, California. So I think everybody's putting their shoulder to the wheel, trying to get the money out, trying to be good partners, trying to do this in a nation-to-nation fashion, respecting not just the needs, but respecting the wisdom of what's happening across the country, and we're proud of that record. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Chairwoman Bryan, and I think it actually ties into Mr. Podesta's last point, which is tribal nations know how to do the work that they need to do on the ground. And so could you please share some of your experience in getting projects off the ground as it relates to the bill, IRA, and the ARP?
Hishjay, hello. It is such an honor to serve on this panel with other distinguished individuals. And it's been an honor to serve on the first Department of Interior Stack Committee with the first Native American, Deb Holland, and just to advocate for unmet needs that affect tribal nations. But most importantly, historically, the dollars and the influx of dollars during a pandemic that none of us in this room ever expected Someone asked me, did I ever think that a 24/7 operation would be closed, and I immediately told them no. So what we began to do is to research, see where the shortages were. Supply chain shortage was everywhere. So we immediately began to expand our community garden, and of course we all like to eat, and a lot of the tribal members were saying, oh, we're going to the grocer, the shelves are empty. So there was definitely an issue with supply chain management. So we began to put in process a plan for a meat processing plant. And so being so rural, we have one of the largest cattle herd in the state of Alabama. And even before COVID, we were having to send that to another state just for processing. So we immediately invested $30 million in a meat processing plant that will not only help our tribal community, but surrounding communities in the state as well. So at the same time, being so rural in the Porch area, of course, we're in LA, not Los Angeles, Lower Alabama, and of course, broadband definitely did not work for our students. And I was hosting a call with Speaker Pelosi with other tribal leaders, and I lost connectivity, and I immediately said, that's our next project. So we immediately invested $10 million in expanding broadband, not just for our reservation, but a 13-mile radius. So it's really helped our students, helped our Boys and Girls Club to be able to connect. As you know, our students were so far behind because parents are not teachers. They do not have an education to teach these children. And so we're going to see in the future just what this pandemic has done there, and them not having access or adequate access to be able to do the work they needed to stay at the level that they needed to be with education. So we invested almost $17 million in education with tutoring, expanding our after-school programs, the broadband expansion. But most importantly, I think with the executive order and with the strings removed, it allowed all tribal nations to be able to figure out how to use these dollars to meet the needs of each of your communities. Geographically, we all have different needs and different issues that we face. So therefore, it was so important that those dollars, we were all able to use those dollars to meet the needs and the demands of our community. And of course, that's the dollars that were allocated during a pandemic. That is the past. So it's so important for us as leaders to advocate for unmet needs of Indian country for the future, and really in a bipartisan way. I think this truly showed self-governance and truly what tribal nations can do if you would allow us the funding to meet the needs of tribal communities. So along with a lot of other things, we actually, from March the 13th until June the 8th, we did not lay off any employees. We did not furlough any employees. We paid their health insurance. We made sure to take care of them because they are a part of our tribal family. And when we were able to open, they were ready to go to work for us. And it was truly record number years for us because we invested in them. We invested almost $5 million just to keep patrons safe at all of our properties. And we spent a lot of dollars in the state, and that truly garnered us a better relationship with a lot of individuals within the state. The state did not have the dollars for rural communities to purchase refrigerators in order to take care of the vaccine. And so therefore, we were able to donate a lot of money to the state, set up vaccination clinics throughout the state, just to help save lives and help people. But most importantly, that's who we are as Indian country. We're resilient people and we can overcome things. But now it's so important in this next administration that we advocate. We've shown them what we can do with self-governance. If you would allow us the funding with no strings attached, there's so much that can be accomplished.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Shifting back to energy, as it is a priority of the administration, really focusing on clean energy and the fight against climate change. This question is for Deputy Secretary Turk. Could you please comment on how DOE has leveraged the historic levels of funding in the Biden-Harris administration to support tribes in the clean energy revolution?
Yeah, thanks very much, Liz. And let me just say to start what an absolute honor it has been. A real privilege to be part of a Biden-Harris administration. Under John's leadership, Liz, Secretary Holland is such a phenomenal champion and inspiration for so many of us. Andrea working hand in hand in partnership with all of you. Speaking as someone who's focused on clean energy and climate more generally, I hope everybody noticed what John said about what the bill and IRA means. Not just the biggest investment in the U.S.'s history, and it is the biggest investment in clean energy and climate in the U.S.'s history, but the biggest single investment ever in the history of humanity in climate and clean energy. That makes me incredibly proud as someone who's worked for decades in this space and someone who has 3 kids that we hope to pass a better world on to. It has been a particular honor and privilege in this role working with Secretary Granholm, all our phenomenal talent at the Department of Energy, supporting your sovereignty and working in true partnership, impactful partnership to try to help leverage this funding that John was talking about in ways that help all of you and help your tribes going forward. Let me give you 3 examples of what we've been able to do. We've had more money, we've had more impact, we've had more projects, but 3 specific examples of what we've done. I had a chance to travel a couple times during this administration to Hopi and Navajo country. We had some historic amounts of money to help bring electricity to some of our folks out in those areas who haven't had electricity before. And just seeing the impact of what that means for those individuals who I had a chance to visit with, but knowing that it's not just a few individuals, it's dozens, it's hundreds, given the scale of the funding that we're talking about. And this is the most amount of money ever from the Department of Energy to leverage electricity access in those countries, in those tribes. So just the personal pride, the pride that our department invested with these amounts of funding to bring that electricity, and just speaking in Navajo and Hopi, but other tribes across the country. That's one example. A second example is $250 million, and that's a lot of money, but it's the scale of investment needed when you're talking about transmission. If we're going to take advantage of clean energy, we need to have more transmission in our country. We need to make sure we're taking where we can get solar, where we can get wind, and bring it to our demand centers. This particular project, $250 million for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, working with Portland General, a phenomenal utility, taking advantage of an opportunity for tribes not only to benefit yourselves from these clean energy resources and assets, but frankly, to get resources and get economic opportunity as well. And that's just one example. I could pull out other examples. Third example, and John stole a little bit of my thunder, was our loan program. This is a loan program that's been around. It originated back in the Obama administration. Among other things, it was what provided Tesla an early loan. Elon Musk doesn't like to talk about the government support he got early on in Tesla's history, but this was a big deal for Tesla. It was a big deal to get that industry up and running. We've been doubling down, tripling down during the Biden administration, including a particular provision that allows us to work with tribes directly. Now, this is something we've been working on for quite some time. We had, unfortunately, it was the first. It's fortunate that it is the first, the $72.8 million that John talked about for the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay in California. But what we need is your partnership. We're helped so that it's not just the first. We have many, many coming going forward. So that's some of the bigger impacts, the bigger projects that we've had. What I'd like to conclude with, at least for this question, is there's so much more work to be done. There's so much more partnership opportunities going forward. I wanted to highlight just a couple of those. One, we've got some historic amounts of money for home energy rebates. This is money for folks, especially those who need it the most, to take advantage of heat pumps, to take advantage of insulation, to take advantage of some of these technologies that so far in our country, unfortunately, just the wealthier folks have had a chance. It's not only good for pollution, good for our climate, but it can save you a lot of money. But what we've seen is it needs a little bit of upfront investment sometimes, especially for those who can't afford that upfront investment. That's what this home energy rebates program is about. We actually have $225 million set aside for tribes. That's how Congress wrote it. That's how we're working in the Biden-Harris administration. We need to work with all of you to get that money out the door as quickly as possibly as impactful as possible, and that's a work in progress with all of you. Second unfinished business is annual appropriations, right? This historic level of bill and IRA funding is phenomenal for all the reasons that we've been talking about, but annual appropriations, that amount of money that Congress gives the department annually and other departments like Andrea's each and every year is incredibly, incredibly important. I'm proud that we've grown our budget in Indian Energy. Wahala, who's just such a phenomenal leader of that office for us at our department, when we came in, it was about $18 million. We've grown that up to $75 million per year. That is a huge increase. I feel incredibly proud of that. But of course, we just can't have FY24 being $78 million. We need the next year's budget and the next year's budget and make sure we've got the tools and resources to help you all in the partnership that you all deserve.
Well, thank you so much. We've all talked about the transformational investments in Indian country that this administration has made. And last year at this Tribal Nations Summit, the President signed Executive Order 14112, which really reforms federal funding programs and really shapes it to be more in line with tribal self-determination. So Governor Lewis, can you please tell us how you've seen the last 4 years when it comes to accessibility and usability of federal funding, especially in light of what we've been talking about today, the historic levels of funding going out into tribal nations?
Right, thank you. And I think the executive order, that builds upon just an incredible amount of respect for the treaty trust responsibility for tribal sovereignty. I mean, you see Porchman and, you know, what they did during COVID, what all of us did during COVID, right? That's a testament to our resiliency. But it's also a testament, you know, to an administration that respects the government-to-government relationship, that unique nation-to-nation relationship. For the community, how we saw this was, you know, with, again, it allowed an all-of-government approach, you know, where we were able to work with, and I'll give two examples. I'll give one having to do with ISDEA, you know, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act, which was, you know, that's a monumental act, you know, for tribal nations. And we were able to use the 105L process to build 2 new schools and a state-of-the-art police department using this, working with our federal partners. And I know that I see some of the leadership from Mashantucket Pequot and from the Mississippi Band of Choctaws that are actually doing their own 105Ls as well. And so this could truly have a transformative effect for infrastructure, for having to, what 105L is an opportunity, you know, to build important infrastructure, schools, police stations, those that are funded through that trust relationship, and build those to your needs and to the future needs of your tribal nations, and lease those back to the federal government. So, you know, so again, we were able to build 2 new state-of-the-art schools in our reservation, as well as a new police station as well, to help out, you know, with keeping all of our community members and those that come through our community safe as well. Now, the flip side of that too, or rather, you know, building upon that too, is allowing departments such as the Department of Interior to partner with very innovative projects, such as those solar panels over canals. We were able to work with Army Corps, but also with Bureau of Reclamation for solar panels, where we're able to, and this is what we call our blue-green economy. Blue, protecting our sacred water against evaporation, being good stewards of that, but also green, having to also harness green energy with those solar panels as well, and hopefully providing a great example for others to follow as well. Now, you know, using that, we're building upon that as well. We just also, again, you know, working with our federal partners, allowing us the opportunity, really, the first time ever, tribes are having seats at the table in various areas. At least with water in the Southwest along the Colorado River, we are having seats at the table where we are not just they're participating, we're driving the discussion. And when, a testament to all of us, when we get the resources and we do have authority to sit at the table, our God-given sacred sovereign tribal authority that is reaffirmed, we can bring innovative solutions to long-standing problems using our culture and our tradition. We've done this time and time again, as Chairwoman said. So we are powerful examples of this, and we've shown this time and time again. You know, with the many of our water infrastructure projects, you know, these are innovative. Really, we're pushing the boundaries where even cities and towns and states and regional authorities, they haven't even attempted what Indian country is doing now when we are given the resources and the authority to do so. So this is something that I hope all of us tribal leaders, that we take pride in. You know, that it emboldens us to keep moving forward into this new year. You know, please, everyone, you know, each and every one of us, we have that key to unlock just an incredible amount of resiliency and just, you know, state-of-the-art thinking that I know that Indian country has, and we are, as we can see with a lot of these projects, we're unleashing that now for the benefit of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I like the way you framed the executive order as a key. So Deputy Secretary Palm, could you please explain or describe how HHS has moved forward with implementing the executive order?
Thanks, Liz. We have certainly, you know, before, but spurned by the executive order, looked for ways, operational as well as programmatic, that we can find opportunities and do a better job in respecting self-determination and tribal sovereignty. I think, if I might, I'll just sort of pick a few examples to highlight the work that we have done. First, as you all know, HHS is the largest grantor in the federal government. We put out more dollars on an annual basis in the form of grants than any part of the federal government. And so for me as the COO, as the Deputy Secretary, the opportunity to think about how we use that massive lever to invest more and better in tribal communities was a really important opportunity. And as part of that, we have revised our policy across the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to ask our agencies to look, as they develop their NOFOs, their Notice of Funding Opportunities, if it would be statutorily permissible to do a tribal set-aside in that program. And if not, is there an option to do a tribal-only application where those are the only eligible applicants for funding? And we think this is a shift in mindset for a department as large as ours is, but setting that expectation, encouraging our agencies to think differently about the responsibility that we have to tribal nations, I think is a really important inflection point for us at HHS, that as we continue to implement it, as it continues to move forward, we really do hope that you see and feel the difference, and that you hold us accountable for doing the work of checking our statutes and making sure we are maxing out our ability to provide direct funding to tribes. Second, and one that our friends in the health and human services space are going to be very familiar with, because it is a rule that we have reinstated and recently published just this past Thursday, and it relates to the Indian Child Welfare Act and data reporting. We have heard loud and clear across the board.
Are the,
See if her mic's live.
This is an old building, folks.
Yeah. We might have made some bill investments here.
Let's just try to amplify our voices. So we're going to try to amplify our voices and continue the panel while we
Testing, testing.
going on with the electricity. And so
All right, everybody, they said they're going to try to amplify their voices, so we're going to need each and every one of you guys to be quiet and listen well. Thank you.
wow.
All right. So first was our NOFO process. Direct access to funding for tribes. How's the volume? Ah, excellent. Second was our Indian Child Welfare Act data reporting requirements. We just finalized a regulation, which will, some people, which will really, as we've heard directly from you all, make it easier for you to implement that law and take care of your kids who are in foster care. Third, we are announcing today a piece of work that I am personally pretty proud of and have been invested in, and that is around tribal data sovereignty and access to data. Again, we heard loud and clear from all of you, particularly through the pandemic, the need to have access to your own data for purposes of serving your communities. And so we are finalizing today a data access policy for tribes and tribal epidemiology centers, which includes a new website. We heard also from you all, you have no idea what data we have that would be pertinent to all of you. And so not only can you see the types of data that you can access, it gives you points of contact across the department who are responsible. There are now policies at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services about timelines for responses to your data requests, processes for appeals of those data requests. We've announced an annual conference with our data people and your data people to talk about the issues related to your access to data and the ways in which we can better be in partnership with you so that you can use and access your data to serve your tribal members. I think a really important part of how we do our work together, particularly in a scientific and data-driven agency like HHS. It's certainly the least we can do. And then finally, another piece of business that I have been particularly invested in is the modernization of our electronic health record at the Indian Health Service. We have successfully awarded that contract and are about to go to pilot. Oklahoma has agreed to be our pilot location. We'll do that here in the next few weeks in January. It's hard to believe that's only a few weeks away. And then we will roll it out Indian country wide. This is a really, again, from a data perspective, from a data security perspective, from a care coordination perspective, from an ability for us in collaboration to serve tribal members. This modernization is a long time coming and a critical part of the way in which we think about the quality of care that those who avail themselves of the Indian Health Service deserve and are entitled to. And I see Rosalind back there, and I just would acknowledge her leadership in helping get this piece of business across the finish line. So much appreciation to her and to all of you, and we look forward to that EHR being accessible across the whole swath of tribal nations. So that's it for me. Thank you for...
All right, well, thank you so much, DevSec. You heard that HHS has heard from tribal communities loud and clear, and that's a result of the unprecedented access that the administration has provided to tribes. So this next question is for Senior Advisor Podesta. How have you seen the tribal leadership involvement in the clean energy space really impact the work that you all are working on?
Great, thanks. I grew up in Chicago, so I'm known to mumble, but I'll try to. But I think I want to make a couple of points. First of all, I think that all the agencies that have been involved in both the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act have tried to ensure that we're using some of the money to do capacity building and planning so that tribes can build their own projects. And I want to mention a a couple of, that's really been true in the climate resilience space. It's been true in tribal electrification, that some of that early seed money then leads to be able to plan and build bigger projects. So I think that's one strategy that every one of the agencies have utilized. To give a specific example, EPA had a $5 billion program called Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant Program that was making money available to cities, states, and tribes to do their own planning for how locally they could think about reducing pollution, creating healthy environments, trying to tackle climate change in their local community. About 300 million of that was set aside and now has been awarded by EPA on specific programs that were bottom up, built by tribes, proposed to EPA, and that money has been awarded. There's another really innovative part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a weird name called direct pay. And it's available, again, to tribal nations, to cities, to states, to nonprofits that can build, take advantage of what has only been available to private sector companies to build clean energy projects, and you get a check directly back. If you're compliant with the program, you get a check from the government, which can be 50, 60, sometimes 70% of the cost of building those projects, whether that's wind, solar, storage, transmission that Dave talked about. That direct pay feature I want you to know about, because that's not a competitive program. If you build the project, the Treasury will send a check back to you for a very significant amount of the value of building that clean energy program. There's one other. I'll give you a specific example that just happened. The Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians in Minnesota just built a 15 megawatt utility scale solar and storage project, where they're in the process of building it. That will be almost fully funded through this vehicle of direct pay. There's also, and again, this has been undersubscribed, so I want to sort of draw a line under this. There's a low-income community bonus credit that's available to build smaller scale projects, community solar, rooftop solar, and there's that is allocated by the Department of Energy and the Department of Treasury. 200 megawatts a year for the next 10 years is available to tribes. But you need to apply for that, you get an allocation, and again, that's a very, very significant credit that sits on top of the credits that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's a way that tribes can directly access and get a major bump on the cost of building out community and rooftop solar. But I think, the bottom line is really the executive order itself, which is the respect that I think our administration, that the president, the vice president, and our agencies are showing to tribal governance. And I think Governor Lewis said it best right at the beginning, which is if you have that respect, then you can make wonderful things happen. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Chairwoman Bryan. And I think it's a really important question in that we need to know from tribal leaders how we ensure that these funding reforms and the continued respected relationship that we have with tribes moves forward. So with that.
I'm not sure if we're live or not. Are we live?
Oh, it's working.
Okay. Well, to begin with, for most of you who follow Alabama politics, you will know that we have had to work with predominantly a Republican leadership. And of course, our sovereignty is constantly being attacked from all levels. And it's so important for all leaders to understand the fight that we're facing. No matter the next 4 years what we are dealing with, I still remember what Dale Kildee always referenced. He always had the Constitution, and he always reminded me as a leader to always educate people about the trust and treaty obligation to the First Americans. And that is so true. And it takes all of us doing the same thing. USET's mantra is there's strength in unity, but I'll go even further. There's strength in numbers. And sometimes as tribal leaders, we all have to stick together. Wow. I'm back. But we should all work collectively together. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a lot of tribal leaders to educate this next administration on the unmet needs of Indian country and their obligation, trust and treaty obligations to the First Americans. And so it's important that we all stick together to educate them. I know that historically this last administration has done a phenomenal job of meeting the needs of Indian country, allowing the strings to be removed so that we have the dollars that we need to help support our communities. But always remember that it's always going to be a fight for the First Americans to protect our sovereignty. But always know that there's a lot of warriors in this room. There's a lot of tribal leaders who have the passion to go and advocate for the unmet needs of our tribal nations. Our job as leaders is to pave the path for the next 7 generations. And every leader in this room, certainly the legacy I hope will be left is that we've done just that on the national level, that we never give up. We're still here and we will never give up, but we're stronger together in so many ways. You know, as I've oftentimes referenced, we can have our differences, but we can agree to disagree and compromise and do what's best for tribal nations collectively together. And to each of you here, I challenge each of you to work with this administration in a bipartisan way to meet the needs of the First Americans, as Dale Kildee says, the treaty trust obligations for tribal nations. Mado.
Thank you. So we have one last question, and it's for Deputy Secretary Turk. Deputy Secretary Turk, can you please describe some of the actions that DOE has moved forward with implementation of Executive Order 14112?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think when our fellow Americans, whether First Americans or other Americans, look at something like Executive Order 114112, 5.2362, or in this particular instance, EO 14112, eyes glaze over and it's just gobbledygook to them. What I think this EO means to me as we've been implementing it, and again to John's earlier point, we've had such an open door, I think, in this administration, not only of our political appointees, but just phenomenal career civil servants who want to do the right thing, who've stepped up. But we need to have an EO, we need to have a central organizing principle, we need to have reminders, we need to have processes, right? So we all do the right thing. To me, this EO is about respecting sovereignty, but it's also about making things more user-friendly and more efficient, right? If we've got money, but you can't access it, it does no good, right? Like, we need to make sure that we're able to do this in the way we need to, with quality control, with the protections that we need to, but to make it user-friendly and efficient. So let me give you a few examples of what we've done in our department, I think very much complementary to what Andrea described and what they're doing at HHS. We've got this home rebates program that I mentioned, this unfinished business. We've tried to simplify those forms so that you can get the conditional commitment. This is a formula grant, or part of it's a formula grant. So this is designated to tribes, but we need to get that money to you all in an efficient way. So instead of having 50 different forms that are all 250, 600 pages before you even get any of that money, we've simplified the forms so that you can get the money, you can get the conditional commitment, so that you can have that and sharing that with your tribes. Second example, John and I both mentioned our loan program. This is useful historically for big dollar amounts. We're talking hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in loans. That may work for some tribes, it may not work for other tribes. So what we've tried to do is make that both more user-friendly, but also improve the efficiency so we can do smaller loans. So we can do tens of millions instead of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in loans. That makes a big, big difference in terms of this tool being more accessible to more tribes. One of, I think, our worst acronyms that we have out there is EECBG, for those who know what that is. It's the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant Program. It does not roll off the tongue. It's an incredibly important way to get money out to folks so they can take advantage of energy efficiency improvements, including at tribes. Again, we've got some formula money that's coming out. We need to have that come out efficiently. What we found is that it may work best to have some consolidation among tribes, some tribes working together to get access to that money to improve some scales of efficiency. We've also tried to reduce the cost share, right? Cost share is an issue that we hear again and again and again. If there's money that you all can access but you don't have the cost share, then again, it's just not worth it. We've reduced the cost share in some of those programs in the EECBG down to 5% to make it more accessible, to make it more usable for tribes all across the country. Last thing I want to underscore, and this comes from EO 14112, but more generally, I just signed out as the Deputy Secretary an order for all of our offices, all across our department. It's a $50 billion per year organization to improve the consultation that we have with tribes. We've got some great examples of offices doing that, but we've got some examples where we're not where we should be. I sent out an order on behalf of the Secretary for all parts of our department to do it the right way, to learn lessons of where it's been done successfully, to make sure that we're all living and breathing this. And again, I found a very open door for our career civil servants, but we as the leaders of the department need to make sure that we're pushing the envelope, we're doing the right thing in all ways, including consultation going forward.
Thank you so much. And miigwech, thank you to all of our panelists today. I think we heard just a few ways that these historic investments are impacting Indian country, and it's with great hope that these investments and the work that we've done together continue to result in lasting and transformational impact. It's absolutely critical that the United States continues to honor the trust and treaty responsibility and continue to invest in tribal needs and priorities. I am incredibly proud of the steps that the Biden-Harris administration has taken to ensure those investments and truly honor the trust and treaty responsibility. So thank you, and miigwech.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
Thanks. I'm going to ask. You're ready.
Governor, thank you so much.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for your
Maybe just go on. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't read it. We will now break for lunch. Please follow the usher's directions to the Bison Bistro located in the basement for lunch. Please begin returning to the auditorium at 12:50 p.m. to ensure adequate time to go through security. Again, please begin returning to the auditorium at 12:50 p.m. to ensure adequate time to go through security.